Now, AGL Energy has for now rejected tech billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes' $8 billion bid for the company, stating that it materially undervalued the company. Joining me now to explain what in God's name is happening in the energy sector is business columnist Terry McCrann. Terry, Mike Cannon-Brookes is pushing to accelerate the closure of major coal-fired power stations. His offer promised to get AGL out of coal in just a decade. What sort of impact would that have on households and businesses? And does he have a chance of actually making that deal happen?
Well, the short answer to your question, Rita, is obviously it would be disastrous. We've already seen the closure of the Eraring, or the proposed closure of the Eraring plant in 2025, which is Origin, so that what Mike Cannon-Brookes says he wants to do, he wants to get to this world of lovely coal-free power, quote unquote. I put the power in quotation marks, excuse me, much quicker. But let me take a step back and start with what, when you cut through all the green, save the planet, save the barrier reef rhetoric, what essentially Cannon-Brookes is doing is he wants to make money. He's not putting $8 billion on the table, particularly in partnership with an investment group, which is there charged with making money for its investors. He's not doing this to play Father Christmas to either Australians in general or the customers of AGL in particular. He's there to make money. And what he is saying, in essence, is that we can make billions of dollars of profit out of Australian consumers and out of Australian taxpayers who are handing out these multi-billion-dollar subsidies to so-called green, so-called renewable energy. We can make billions of dollars by going even deeper and quicker into that space. So he's not Santa Claus, he's not Mother Teresa. He's at core, he's a hard-nosed businessman who wants to make a lot of money.
But is he going to make that money from the market purely, or is there a great deal of public money that has to underpin this entire venture?
Absolutely, Rita. That's the whole point of this whole process. That they talk about, those on the green renewable energy side of the equation talk about that renewables are supposedly cheaper than old coal-fired power generation. But they're only cheaper if you don't have to provide the power 24/7. It's all very well to be able to get away with just selling power into the grid when the wind's blowing or the sun is shining. And when that's not happening, what do? You get power from real power stations, either coal or gas. And so the only way he can make this whole process work of accelerating the closure of the coal-fired power stations, the ones that actually generate power, is if he's getting a guarantee that the power will come from somebody, somewhere, when the wind isn't blowing in the space that AGL is intended to occupy going forward. And secondly, fundamentally, that either through subsidies or consumers ultimately paying more directly for their power, you'll get the dollars flowing across the counter as well. So this is fundamentally about costing consumers, costing taxpayers money. And at the end of the day, if we actually go down this path of closing all our coal-fired power stations, we will have blackouts, we will have brownouts, because ultimately there's nowhere that the power is going to come from. If you go totally renewable, you go totally wind, you go totally solar, plus batteries, which can last for a couple of hours. At the end of that process, you end up with no power, and that's the disaster that he wants to visit on Australia and accelerate that process.
And we're seeing that disaster unfold with Origin Energy's decision to close Australia's largest coal-fired power plant. You wrote about that. And you mentioned the permanent blackouts and rolling brownouts that we can look forward to. But Terry, who's to blame for this self-harm we are indulging in? Is it the mad climate change activists? Is it the rent-seeking renewable investors? Or is it the spineless politicians? Who's to blame for the situation we're finding ourselves in?
you've captured it exactly, Rita, in those three characterisations. That, you know, the green zealots, the rent-seeking main chances, and the spineless politicians. You've captured exactly. Those are the three groups combined, which are driving us into this slow motion and increasing, and it's probably not going to be slow motion for much longer. I mean, what struck me about the impact of the Origin announcement, which clearly came out of left field, was a surprise to everyone, including the government of New South Wales, because we saw Matt Keane, the so-called energy minister, although he doesn't seem to be too fussed about actually delivering energy to consumers in New South Wales. We saw Matt Keane's reaction. He was gobsmacked because suddenly that future that was over the horizon, you know, maybe, you know, somebody else's problem in the 2030s or the 2040s, suddenly it was going to be his problem when Origin closed Eraring in 2025. Suddenly, that's only 3 years ahead. You might actually be the minister, you might actually be the so-called energy minister when those blackouts and those brownouts actually start to arrive.
You're right, and I would encourage everybody to go to Sky News's website and look up Matt Keane's car crash interview with our own Shari Marksland. He was floundering there for a solid 10 minutes. It was good viewing. Terry McCrann, always fantastic to get your insights. Thanks for joining me this evening.